The more you know about fighting, the more you realize that it's nearly impossible to know. Just when you think you figured out exactly how two fighters will behave in a matchup against each other, they go and do something that nobody could have possibly predicted. In mixed martial arts, sometimes 1 + 1 = 2, and sometimes 1 + 1 = avocado. And here are some incredible examples of all of us collectively having absolutely no idea where things were going. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and these are 10 times massive fights played out in entirely unexpected ways. Number 10, Hickson by knockout. Did you guys know that Kevin Randleman knocked out Mirko Cro Cop? If you didn't know, don't worry, because Mauro Ranallo screamed it at the top of his lungs 57 times right after it happened, so you will never ever forget.
Kevin the Monster Randleman! Kevin Randleman! Kevin Randleman! Randleman has knocked out the Croatian sensation!
But when we think about that outcome, sure, it's surprising. Mirko is an all-time great striker, and Kevin was primarily a wrestler, right? But a few things. Randleman was absolutely capable of knocking someone out. The guy was a powerhouse. Not to mention, a lot of times, strikers underestimate or are confused by grapplers because their striking is not what they expect, or they're worried about the takedown, and it leads to openings, like that big shot that Khabib landed on Conor. And so Randleman getting a KO on Cro Cop is definitely surprising, but not outside the realm of expectation. But you know what is entirely unexpected, and something that is not talked about anywhere near enough? Cro Cop submitting Randleman in their rematch. Now yes, it was a guillotine choke in the first minute, which is sort of the puncher's chance of submissions, but who in their right mind would even imagine Mirko going for a submission in any fight at that point, let alone against Randleman? The choke would be the first ever submission win in 8 years of competition for Cro Cop. He wouldn't get another until his fight with Pat Barry 6 years later, so sure, we all talk about the Randleman win a lot more, but damn it, Cro Cop by submission doesn't even sound right. That is the real surprise.
God, I suck!
Number 9, Natural Born Tactician. When your nickname is the Natural Born Killer, it comes with a bit of an expectation from fans, you know? Nobody with that name is going to be a sensible and tactical fighter, or at least one would think. And leading up to the Carlos Condit bout with Nick Diaz, yeah, Condit was a wrecking ball. Rory Mack, fight of the night, ended with a KO in the last seconds. Dan Hardy, they both just threw hands. Dan went down, Carlos did not. Knockout of the night. After that, another first round knockout of the night, a flying knee against Dong Young Kim. Condit was more than living up to his nickname, and so while fans were bummed about not getting to see Diaz St. Pierre, they were more than happy to see such a maniac throw down with Nick, who, again, had expectations very high. He had that all-timer with Paul Daly, then a full-on battle with BJ Penn, but the Carlos Condit we got against Nick Diaz was a far cry from his recent output. Leg kicks were the name of the game. Condit would land 68 over the course of the fight, and that was by design. The tactical approach more than paid off. While Diaz faithful cried 1, 2, and 5 after the bout, Condit would get the judge's nod on all 3 cards. It was a brilliant play, and had it been a regular NBK fight, I think he would have crumbled to Diaz's ability to absorb punishment and just keep coming forward. Number 8, target practice. To say that expectations were low for the fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Al Iaquinta is putting things lightly. The fight never should have happened, and if UFC 223 weren't one of the most insane cards this sport has ever produced, it would not have happened ever. Khabib was meant to fight for the vacant lightweight title against Tony Ferguson, then Max Holloway, then it was going to be Anthony Pettis, but only because Mike Chiesa got glass in his face courtesy of a flying dolly thrown by Conor McLunatic. They wanted to do Paul Felder, but he wasn't ranked, and so with literally nobody left to turn to save this damned card, they threw Raging Al in there. Now, that said, even if we weren't really looking at this like it would be a competitive fight, given where both of them were at the time in their careers, Raging Al's last win and his last fight was a year earlier against Diego Sanchez, there was an expectation that we would see Khabib fight like Khabib, meaning he was going to put the Dagestani handcuffs on Al and pummel him mercilessly on the ground until the referee was forced to hop in and put an end to it. And while there would be some of that, I mean, Nurmagomedov did get 6 takedowns and have 10 minutes of control time, the vast majority of the fight would end up on the feet, with Khabib explaining afterwards he went off script to get some reps in, essentially.
When I catch Iaquinta, to be honest, I think I can take him down anytime, but like in my mind, I think, hey, I want to stay a little bit 5 rounds. Feel this distance, you know.
The Eagle would throw 255 strikes from distance during this one, the most of any fight he ever had in his UFC career, and he absolutely dominated. This was 5 rounds that easily went to Nurmagomedov, just not in the way that we were all expecting. Number 7, outcost. There's a pretty solid argument to be made for George St. Pierre being one of, if not the best wrestler in the context of mixed martial arts the sport has ever seen, which is a pretty damn impressive space to be in considering his background had absolutely nothing to do with grappling. But he took to it like what's a Canadian fish? A Vancouver lamprey. Alright, GSP took to grappling like a fucking Vancouver lamprey to water, which goes incredibly against against this idea that the most elite grapplers have been doing this since they were knee-high to a grasshopper, making it almost impossible to catch up to that level of experience. Like Josh Koscheck, for instance, a Division I All-American and national champion. Outside the Olympics, that was the highest level of wrestling that could be reached, and he reached it. So, going into their first encounter, this was right after St. Pierre had embarrassingly lost the title to Matt Serra. Most assumed that the better grappler would be Koscheck by a huge margin, and that GSP would need to try to keep the fight standing to utilize his striking advantage. But Josh hadn't considered one thing: the rhythm.
Control the rhythm.
St. Pierre dominated the grappling, holding Koscheck down for the majority of the fight and stuffing all but one of his takedown attempts. It was a shocking play by St. Pierre, who had only shown a small bit of his grappling prowess up to that point, but we'd sure get a ton more after that. Number 6, style ender. I don't think that most people thought that Sean Strickland should even be in a title fight with Israel Adesanya, let alone were they expecting some incredible performance. Despite scoring a few solid victories in 2023, most fans were still thinking about that loss to Alex Pereira. That was Sean Strickland, standing there like iCarly before he got absolutely demolished. And so with Izzy having finally overcome Poatan in their rematch, it felt a bit like, well, the guy's done everything at this point, so we gotta throw somebody in there. Strickland has a couple wins, he's popular, let's make it a card. And a card, they made it. It was one of those fight weeks where people were more excited about the press conference just to see the circus than they were about the actual fight.
He wears a shirt to shit on his ex-girlfriend. This is the fucking kind of champion we have, and it's a goddamn shame. The cringe lord is he, bro, as long as fucking PETA doesn't come fucking rush the stage, man.
Adesanya was a gigantic favorite, minus 650, which is Vegas saying that Sean had about as good a chance of winning as beating Mortal Kombat 2 at the arcade on a single quarter. The shit just wasn't gonna happen, and absolutely nobody was thinking it would happen by way of Strickland outstriking Adesanya. But a massive first-round knockdown by Tarzan would lead to near total domination the rest of the fight. The relentless forward pressure that Strickland is known for seemed to have Izzy on the back foot all fight, never really ever able to recover from that first round knockdown, to the point where we didn't even need the cards to know the decision when the final horn blew. Was this the genius strategy of Coach Eric Nixick? No, it was just Sean being Sean.
Here's the thing about marriage.
Number 5, throw your wrestler now. In the fight that Francis Ngannou took the UFC heavyweight title, we saw an evolution of his game that was surprising, but still in his wheelhouse, and that was patience. Up through his second encounter with Stipe Miocic, Ngannou had been a lightning rod that would go off in the first minute or so, usually, and end the fight. Unless, of course, he was getting completely worked over like he did in that first Miocic fight because he had no patience. So when he patiently dismantled Stipe, it was a pleasant surprise, but it pales in comparison to the way he would beat former teammate Cyril Gane in his first defense. The prevailing wisdom was that if the champ were to retain, it would be with his elite power and perhaps a bit of that patience he'd learned thrown in there. But no, Francis would put on a grappling clinic of sorts, landing 4 of 5 takedowns and having 8.5 minutes of control time. A feat all the more incredible when you realize that he came into the fight with a severely compromised knee that really needed surgery already before the fight even happened. Not a soul walked in that night saying, yeah, I really see Ngannou's grappling being the difference maker in this one, unless you believe Gane after the fight, which I do not.
It was not a surprise.
Number 4, no dusty bitches. Isn't it great when a fight that we all think is gonna suck ends up being awesome? Even with the heated rivalry between these two, there wasn't anybody expecting fireworks when Kamaru Usman defended his welterweight title against Colby Covington. Usman's whole thing up to that point was that he was boring. Woodley fight, boring. Masvidal fight, boring. This was Marty Snoozman after all. He was amazing at controlling a bout and gliding through in the least entertaining way possible. Then there was Colby, who, sure, was recently a big fan of throwing strikes, but they landed with the same lack of damaging ability as Usman when or if he did throw, and given Covington's wrestling pedigree, along with the fact that he'd likely have to fend off Usman's wrestling all night, it really just felt like despite all the smoke and big talk, we were going to get a snoozer grapple fest. Instead, we got a whole ass shootout. Not a single takedown was attempted. The pair threw a combined 755 strikes. It was a good old-fashioned slobber knocker, as JR would say, and it was truly the best possible outcome for such a fight. All 5 rounds were a ton of fun, and it would end in dramatic fashion. What was to be one of the most disappointing title fights ever turned out to be one of welterweight's best. Number 3, they fly now. The fight between Brock Lesnar and Shane Carwin was truly the biggest, most over-the-top heavyweight bout ever. Both of these guys were just straight out of a comic book. It didn't even make sense how stupidly big they were. And while their gigantic size was just one aspect of this fight, the other was how how this was all going to play out. In Carwin, you had an absolute decimator. Every single win of his career, a first-round knockout. Full-on Dynamite Kid Tyson mode. As for Lesnar, while not a one-shot KO boxer type, he'd more than shown he could maul the best in the world with his incredible wrestling pedigree and the sheer raw freak athleticism he possessed. So given all that, the hype was crazy for this one because the expectation was that we would be seeing two real-life monsters doing serious harm to each other in one fashion or another. And in some regards, we got exactly what we were expecting. For the first round, Carwin just plowed right through Lesnar, as he had every single opponent in the past. But unlike everyone else, he couldn't put Brock away. He threw 5,700 punches against the cage, but it wasn't getting the job done. Now, we'd not seen Brock take any kind of damage like that before, and how he would react in the second was a mystery. My guess is that nobody was thinking, oh, well, Lesnar will get a submission in the second round now. I don't know if anybody had even considered if Brock Lesnar knew submissions at that point. He was 5 fights into his pro career, but with Carwin just entirely gassed, Lesnar secured the takedown and an arm triangle to complete one of the all-time great and all-time unexpected comebacks ever. On Lesnar's end, though, this was apparently something his team had been considering.
We kind of suspected that he would be prepared for my ground and pound, so Prieto pointed this submission out that this is something that's very feasible for you to do.
Number 2, Cardio Cavallo. There are just certain traits that fighters have that you almost take as objective fact when comparing them to another fighter. For instance, if you took Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Verdum and asked which of these two fighters has the better cardio, the better endurance, while you wouldn't say that it was a problem for Fabricio in his career or anything, you would of course say, well, Cain Velasquez has probably the greatest gas tank in the history of the heavyweight division. So of course, the answer is Cain. It's just a well-known fact. Like Khabib being a better grappler than Conor McGregor. You're not going to get a lot of people arguing with you on that. But lessons were learned when Cain attempted to defend his heavyweight title against Fabricio, and the main one was that there are so many circumstances that can alter the outcome of a bout outside what we think we know that we really probably shouldn't be trying to predict anything, because it's nearly impossible. Who could have possibly predicted that Cain wouldn't acclimate to the thinner air in Mexico City properly, thus tanking his cardio after just 2 rounds, which caused him to panic and get choked by Verdum? Who saw Cain's cardio being a problem in any fight ever? Nobody. It was impossible to know that that would be a factor, to the point where it seemed as unlikely to be a problem in this fight as a UFO landing in the cage. The guy's nickname is Cardio Cain, for God's sake. According to Velasquez himself, though, it was even more than just the thin air.
Preparation definitely wasn't there, and also game plan, a lot of stuff was sloppy, sloppy punches, going forward recklessly without control, and obviously head movement and all that stuff, and I didn't do that in that first one, so.
Still mad we never got that rematch. C-Level Cain is unbeatable. Number 1, cruising to victory. If you remember the rise of Cody Garbrandt, it was a pretty special one, but one that had a very specific theme, and that theme was that Cody was going to knock you the fuck out. In 2016, he got 3 knockouts in a row, all in the first round, which earned him a shot at the champion Dominic Cruz. And since Cody went from unranked to this opportunity in just a year's time, the only thing most people even knew about him in terms of what he could do in the cage is that he punched really hard. Surely he would not be the more technical or faster fighter of the two that night. Dom Cruz is one of the most brilliant fighters in the history of the sport. By that point, it was more than well established he was a living legend. So the narrative going into this one, especially as Cruz and Garbrandt verbally sparred, was brains versus brawn. Cody was a serious threat in that he could put Dom's lights out, but he'd have to be able to hit him. He would have to be able to handle the speed, the movement, the IQ. I still don't quite understand what happened that night, but Cody was more Dominic Cruz than Dominic Cruz. The final scorecards and the stats don't necessarily reflect what happened. You really do have to go watch it for yourself, but it just felt like Cody had every answer to any question Dom posed, but when traffic was heading the other way, it was like Cruz just could not solve the puzzle. Garbrandt made it look easy. A masterful performance for 25 minutes that came out of absolutely fucking nowhere. Just like the editor of this video, Luke Taylor, he's right behind you. Show him some love on his socials and go check out his awesome YouTube channel. A big ol' thanks to the channel members. Your support and input is greatly appreciated. If you want to be a member, hit the join button. It's pretty damn cool. Like and subscribe or Mirko Krokop will choke you out. Leave a comment if at least one of these fights you didn't see coming. And thanks for watching, guys. You have a good one.